Hello and welcome everyone to the Asian Voices Radio podcast, where you'll find real Asian American conversations, including the topics you were too afraid to ask your Asian parents. I'm your host, Josin Tong,
And I am Oslin Tong.
and joining us today is Joseph Lam, the CEO and creator of the card game Parents Are Humans. You can also find him on a Facebook group page called The Parent Project, and you can also find his website, parentsaregifts.com, where they recommend a bunch of hand-picked gift recommendations for your mom and dad that you might have trouble finding yourselves. Welcome, Joseph. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, pretty good. And thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm delightfully shocked that you went that deep and found all of those links.
Oh, hey, man. Honestly, like we want to do like in-depth research on all the people we bring upon. We want them to feel like as if they're heard. We want them to feel like as if everything they're doing is being recognized and accomplished. So it's the least we can do. We really do want to thank you for being on here with us, man.
I'm very excited to hear from you today.
Yeah, excited to share.
What brought about Parents Are Humans?
The truth is, for about 12 years, I had a really broken and distant relationship with my parents. And back then, I made the mistake of keeping it a secret. It was this like deep, dark secret that I wanted nobody to know about. That when I came home, I would lash out at my parents. I would yell at them. I would scream at them. I would basically take out all my stresses and frustrations on a daily basis out on them, as what my way of coping with the things that I was going through. Because back then I didn't have the tools to process all the bullying I went through, the any sort of challenges of growing up. Um, and I was it was 2018 when I hit rock bottom. This was when my 2-year-old company, I had to shut it down. Had almost a 2-year relationship that ended. Almost like everything in my life just crumbled. And I was sitting at rock bottom looking around. And because of some mentors that I had, they pointed me to just look within, start doing some serious personal reflection. I did a few personal development programs. And out of that, I realized that the single most important thing that I had to confront in my life was all of that shame and all of that guilt from having mistreated my parents. And originally, I had thought, wow, I'm just right now in need of finding out what to do next for my career. I was totally still in the external achievement will help solve all my problems mode. And these coaches, these mentors, these programs just dug deep to help me realize that, yeah, I would have regretted it for the rest of my life if I didn't confront all of that pain and try everything in my power to rebuild that relationship with my parents. Yeah, I knew that they wouldn't be around one day, and I wanted to get to know them. Something that, yeah, would take me on this 2-year, 3-year journey now, where I actually eventually met a friend. Her name is Candace, and this was her idea. It was like one of those this is it moments of I just have to do this. Like I asked her, "Do you want to do this?" Because this is something I would never regret working on. So, long story short, 6 months later, we launched the game, and it was so surprising how many other people resonated. And we started selling out our decks, and about a year and a half later of working on this as a side project, just nights and weekends, decided to go full time on it, and that was March of this year, of 2021. So I'm a little more than half a year in.
Wow. Yeah. Half a year in, you've already done a lot,
Yeah, it's been a crazy journey actually.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think a lot of people in our generation like understand how you feel, like surprisingly, like you see all this stuff on social media about like other like Asian American kids or of Pacific Islander kids are always like you see them much more uh loving towards their parents. They put it all over their social medias, their Instagram, their TikToks and stuff like that. So you kind of
Mhm.
wonder how long it took them to get there, you know? Because I think a lot of people our age kind of have like strained relationships with their parents at one point, you know?
Yeah, and I think it resonates with something you said in one of your reflections were about social accountability,
Mhm.
you know? with and I think that's what a lot of these kids are doing, by like portraying and showing off their buddy, or not budding, but their healthy relationship with their parents, and showing off that love, and then showing that it's like possible for others to go
Absolutely.
ahead and have that type of relationship with their parents.
Hmm.
You stated multiple times that there came a day or like a time where the realization hit you that your parents weren't going to be around forever, and that you might regret, or that you would regret not healing that broken relationship between the three of you. Could you tell us what happened in that moment, in that time, that made you come to that thought process? Like, what happened that made you realize the truth at that moment rather than all those years ago?
What a good question. I remember it distinctly. It was this. I did this personal development program called Landmark, and it's this very somewhat controversial program where the type of teaching and the way it's delivered is maybe a little bit intense. So it was imagining kind of like the leader almost like yelling at you in a way, like wake up,
Yeah.
like be
Yeah. Oof.
aware of what's going on in your life. And this one chapter, this one section of that program was completely dedicated to parents and our relationship to our parents. And they it was a set of these beliefs that was like, if you they were telling me, hey, if you don't get to a point where you can freely love your parents, and by loving doesn't mean you have to accept what they've done to you, or uh, um, agree with anything that they've done. It's just loving them for who they are and for who they are not, appreciating everything that they had to go through to to raise you, and basically forgive them for all the ways that they were and all the ways that they were not. And um, it was me hearing that and realizing that I had like a million miles of work to do with all of that. I was like, I am so far away from forgiving my parents, from loving them freely, from being able to be myself around them, for not having to put on this face and pretend that I didn't feel like my entire body crunch up every time I'm at home and want to leave. Like I needed to be free from that in order to live a life that I would be proud of. So the homework assignment that they gave us was to own up to the fact that I was not okay with our relationship, and to say what I wanted to say, basically. And they didn't give me any leeway. Like, this was the power of the program. You had to write out a list of people that you were incomplete with and just confront those relationships then and there. And it was between the breaks where we had to call. I mean, they didn't force us, but it was so clear that it was now or never. That by calling my parents and starting this conversation, it would probably lead to something better, right? Nothing will change if I don't change anything. So I ended up calling them. I was so nervous. I wrote out this entire letter to them. It actually wasn't a long letter. It was just three simple things. I said to my parents while bawling my eyes out that I love them. I said thank you for raising me because I never got that chance to. I never acknowledged them for all the effort they went through. And I promised them, I told them, I want to get to know you two better. I want to be in your lives. Um, and yeah, at that point, I didn't, I didn't allow myself to cry for about 10 years. That was another truth that was, I think, is more common than not. I wanted to be the tough one. I wanted to hold it all together as the, uh, the hurt middle schooler. Um, and I thought, if I let my tears fall, if I was vulnerable, then the bullies would win. So, yeah, I had to take that one step forward in that phone call, and um, the rest is history.
Yeah, that must have been really hard because, as we all like kind of know, especially like being similar first generation Asian Americans, that expressing love through words of affirmation isn't something that's really common. And then I remember like having this conversation with a friend of mine that like are usually what our top love language is. it usually stems from what you lacked with your either your parents or previous partners, anything like that. So like a lot of people when I talk to them, especially that are Asian Americans, a lot of them be like, oh yeah, words of affirmation, just hearing I love you from someone like
Yeah,
makes my day.
yeah.
And then like and when I hear that, I'm just like, I
Or
get that, or like some like it's either words of affirmation or like physical touch because like you hear a lot of other kids don't really get hugs. Yeah, you don't get hugged from your parents. So it's just like, it's really nice. So to hear like how you had to, I guess, kind of face something that you're not used to like actually sit there and be vulnerable with your parents and say what you were feeling. I think that's like a very common fear a lot of like especially Asian American youth are probably going to be going through because it's like they don't know how to even begin to do that because how can you do something you never learned how to do, so I want to commend you for that because that must have been extremely tough.
Yeah, it's so hard to give what you've never received, right? You've never seen it
yeah,
modeled in your own family. So what do? I kind of have to just make it up and go for it.
you have to be the first one to do it. You have to
Yeah.
break the mold, you know?
Yeah.
And especially from here on out with future generations, we're gonna have to learn to like do the things that gave us healing now to
Mhm.
heal future generations, you know?
Yeah. There's a phrase that has become one of my favorite phrases. I don't think I wrote about this, but it's called being a transitional character. And in short, I'm butchering the definition, but it's someone who finds a way to end the suffering and the pain in a generation. And it's one of the most honorable things that a person could ever do, because it's like saying the trauma stops with me, like it ends here.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that my ancestors had to go through that has been being passed on, I'm gonna stop that so that future generations can have more productive lives.
Yeah. That's great, man. Honestly, like I think that's a step all of us need to do or to come to make sure that intergenerational trauma like stops.
Yeah.
In that journey towards repairing your relationship with your parents, you created Parents Are Humans, a card game. Is there a specific reason that you made this healing process through the form of a card game? Did you ever consider any other avenues to try to teach that same lesson other than a card game?
Yeah. I want to give the credit to my co-founder. I actually bought the company from her eventually. But Candace was the one who originally had this idea. And this was she had, we both had a language barrier with our parents. Our Chinese was nowhere near good enough to have the types of in-depth conversations we would have in English with our peers. She had wanted to just make this connection card game. And I think, yeah, at the time we had thought about quite a few different ideas. It was like mulling over, oh, what if it came in the form of an email? And she actually eventually started a company around having these questions go out through email, and it's called Letter Loop. So shout out to Candace. Um, and ultimately, I think what we found was, to our surprise and our delight, a card game was the perfect context to get a lot of these conversations started. I think because there's no real easy, like I don't want to say there isn't one. I just haven't personally come across any baby steps, if you will, for healing really difficult intergenerational, like, misunderstandings, conflicts, tensions. It's really like, okay, kind of do nothing, or maybe go and do family therapy, right? And maybe even do bilingual family therapy and hire someone like that. And that's really hard to find. It's really expensive. There are these programs that are also really expensive. And there wasn't like a easy excuse to just start asking deeper questions and start having what I would like to call novel experiences that eventually create this buffer for people to realize, wow, my nervous system doesn't have to be activated every single time I talk to my parents. My conversations don't always have to go into the worst possible screaming match, right?
Yeah.
And to just have more of those until the relationship starts healing itself.
I think card games was actually the best choice you made. Honestly, because I can't even recall a time in our lives where we actually played any kind of game with our parents.
Yeah.
So I think I think the idea of like
Your
Yeah,
parents
like, to come up to your parents and be like, "Hey, mom, dad, do you wanna play a game?" I think would actually be a great segue in for a lot of people with their parents, 'cause I I don't wanna speak for the majority, but I feel like a lot of people in our generation did not play, like, Monopoly or, like, like, Life with their parents.
I played tic-tac-toe. That was, like, one
Yeah,
thing that I
yeah,
did.
yeah. They made us play Sudoku by ourselves, you know what I mean? Like go ahead, Austin.
Well, I mean, as you know, as the founder of your own company, Parents Are Humans, we know that you're not a stranger to creating startup companies. We actually wanted to know a little bit more about your previous company, Brainbuild. What was the motivation behind creating that? And what was the goal that you were trying to accomplish with it?
Oh my goodness. Thank you all so much for again digging deep and asking questions that typically are not asked of me. So yeah, happy to share. Brainbuild was pretty much my first go at it for as a wannabe entrepreneur. This was I mean the way I see it now, um, whether it was fencing, because I did that at a really high level before, and then entrepreneurship, trying to start a company, these were really projections of my ego, if you will. This was like an extension of my deep desire growing up to I guess prove the bullies wrong, to like to itch that scratch of having a chip on my shoulder, of wanting to be successful, because I thought that was the key to having people love me and accept me. So I want to say that because it's the truth. It's actually the real and the raw of why I started that company. Even though at the time it felt like I was doing a really good thing for the world, which it was, and at the same time I want to acknowledge the underlying pattern that I witnessed in my own life. So um, yeah, Brainbuild was the idea I had in college for what I thought would be a really successful software startup. So we built this mobile app that would sync with calendars for student athletes at colleges, professional sports athletes, and this was trying to automate a lot of what a sports dietitian would do. A registered dietitian would maybe look at your schedule, look at what sport you're doing and the intensity of what you're doing in your workouts, at what time the workouts were, and they would try to help plan every single meal, snack, hydration, sleep event that you would have, and just have you follow that. It's kind of like, I mean, some people colloquially called it like a mom in your pocket. It was like, hey, reminder to drink water, or even more importantly, have this pre-workout snack before your English class, because after class you're going to have to go do your workout and you're going to need that optimal fueling for you to have the best workout. So I ran that for 2 years, had the idea, and raised 2 rounds of funding, did all the stuff that was kind of like, young entrepreneur's dream of making it onto like um, Inc. magazine twice and getting featured. And we even demoed at the New York Stock Exchange and World Trade Center and got in front of all of these world leaders and talked to the commissioner of the NFL. And it was like I was in many ways living on a cloud, but really in the clouds of not understanding what I was doing, and making it all up. And yeah, after 2 years, I realized that I hadn't asked the right questions. I didn't ask myself it was actually a really sustainable long term business. And the contracts that we got were like an order of magnitude smaller than the ones that we had planned for, the ones that we had hoped for. So without a good direction to go in from a business standpoint, I had to make the probably one of the toughest decisions of my life, to just shut it down, to um, yeah, to say goodbye. And I also had to say goodbye to my identity at the time, because that was everything. I was like, I made the mistake of tying my own self-worth directly to the success of the business. It wasn't Joseph Lam and he's just a human being, and then he's just so happened to create this thing called Brain Build. It was like I am brain build, and if it's successful, then I'm successful. But if it's not, then I'm a failure. A lifetime of lessons truly learned from that.
Wow. Yeah, I couldn't imagine like working so hard on something that like what you like probably perceive to be like your in a way for to I guess layman's terms like your baby, your project
Hmm.
baby, you know, and
Hmm.
then have to eventually make that tough choice to let it go. But based on what I was reading about the whole and from what you were explaining, it sounds like Brain Build definitely like I feel like it had it like had you guys been able to get those bigger contracts, I think it could have definitely been very helpful to a lot of people.
I
And
think so
then,
too.
I mean, do you think you'll ever probably bring it back again in the future?
Um, it's possible. I mean, I've talked about it a few times here and there. Um, a part of me goes, I don't know if the structure, like, if it has the best monetary incentives aligned, as in, like, I don't know if people
Mhm.
would actually pay enough money for it to be sustainable, but I do imagine it to be a very successful, perhaps open source project that the community gets to work on and gets to build on top of, right? So I've thought about that, and it's kind of like a gift to the world that I've created, and I don't want it to go to waste.
Going off of your Parents Are Human card game, a lot of it was based off inspiration from your blog post, which is known as 30 reflections from healing a broken relationship with my parents. You've detailed many occurrences of self-realization throughout the span of a few years that helped you come to learn more about yourself and the dynamic between you and your parents. Have you ever considered transforming it into a almost self-help book? Is there a specific reflection in the 30 that you believe is the most important one that can be helpful to anyone that may have either different or unique relationships with their parents that may not be the same as yours?
Ooh, what good questions. So I am writing a book right now, and it's I haven't made as much progress as I would like, which I think is very normal. I'm forgiving
Yeah.
myself for that one. Um, uh, yeah, the priority this year has just been launching these new languages, and yeah, I do want to write a more in depth book about what I went through, because the 30 reflections, they came about from just a it was like a writing challenge, right? Publish 30 essays that were really short, 200 to 250 words, and publish it once a day for 30 days. So I knew that that was also one of those things that I would regret not doing. So I was like, okay, let me do this, get all my thoughts out, and then that's what I did to I eventually just compiled all of those into those essays, and um, so, yeah, I think there's so much more to be said, and I think it would just be really cathartic for myself as well. I think someone said, writing a book is kind of like giving birth. It's this desire that I almost can't live without giving birth to this one product, this one book. And I know that I think a lot of people will resonate. And I only speak that with that confidence because I myself would have needed someone to say all these things. Like, I want to be that person that I never had growing up, to say, hey, look at your relationship with your parents. It's actually okay that things are not that great. And just let's talk about it. Let's let's not keep it a secret. Um, so yeah. And then to your next question of, do I is there one essay that stands out that I think everyone should read? I can't really say that there is one, because I know that, yeah, different lessons for me lands differently for everyone, and I'm also constantly just caught off guard by what people mention, because I'll ask people like, "Hey, what stood out to you?" And then they'll say this one thing that I thought, "Oh, almost no one would read that one. I'm just writing it as like a like I couldn't think of anything else. Let me just write it right now because I needed to publish." So so yeah, I'm realizing that for everyone it's a little different. Um although I would like to say that there is one essay, I forgot which number, about just being curious, that I think is something that would have made a really big difference for me personally. Um, yeah, I was so in the world of it's kind of like me against my parents. My parents will never change and they'll never be different. And if only they did this one thing, then my whole life would be better and the whole world would be better. And sadly, no matter how much I want that, I don't have the power to change them. And um and I just need to get curious about what it is that makes them who they are. Um so
Oh, all
yeah.
right. Well, just one last question, I guess. Could you give us like a little rundown of how the game works, kind of thing?
and
Just let us know how
and
it works.
perhaps like maybe the most wholesome or funniest conversation you got from your parents from that card game, the one that you look back fondly at and you think, I'm glad that I did this because I would have never heard this story
Yeah.
had we not played this game.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can happy to go through those both. So the card game has 50 questions and 20 actions, and then also two levels. So for the questions, we have it's either around life events, relationships, wisdom, or identity. And we designed it such that people can start really easy with like the light questions of what's your favorite food growing up, and tell me about like your favorite book or your favorite movie. And then the hope is that with those easy questions, people eventually get into the harder questions that pull up a lot more. And again, it's just been such an easy way, I think, for people to start that process. And people actually end up going really deep even on the easy questions. So one of my favorite questions is I usually say the first one, what's my favorite food growing up, because that one just led to probably the most formative conversation with my parents. My mom told me about what she struggled with and what she didn't have when she was growing up, and I eventually even wrote her a love letter, telling her that, like, promising her that I would never yell at her again, because I used to take out my frustrations that she would put too much food on my plate. Um, and and I would also like to just mention one more card. I think it was, what was the hardest job that you ever had? Because I ended up talking to my dad about all these jobs that I never knew that he did. Like, I did not know that he was, I think he was like either one of the top waiters or like someone who worked in the kitchen on a train. So in China, he actually worked on a train and served people, and he was like, the only reason I did it was because they gave free food. Like, all of the chefs cooking, you could eat as much of as you wanted to, and that's the perk of working on a train. um, yeah, and then he went to all these crazy experiences where he had to go to the hospital because he overworked himself cleaning a parking garage, and that was one of his jobs moving to America. And yeah, I will never forget these stories. And yeah, I'm eternally grateful that we had those conversations.
Yeah. Honestly, like after hearing the description of how the game works and the levels, I kind of want to get this game now too. Because man, like honestly, now that I think about it, when you explain it that way, the stop popped up to my head where it was like, I feel like our parents only ever want to talk about the now and the future for us, because for us it's like that's all they're focusing on. My children, how are they doing right now and how are they going to be in the future, because I that's all I care about. But like it just like I just got an epiphany that like they never talk about who they used to be. And I think it's important to talk about who they used to be as a person because it helps us, I guess, humanize them more rather than
It
these
helps
like
us it helps us see them as not just our parents. Like when you
yeah.
learn about their past, you kind of realize that they were people too.
Yeah.
Like your website, parents are humans too. They had their whole identity. All you've ever known them as is just mom and dad, but you don't know them as you know whatever their first names are.
Yes.
Yeah, to me, it's like these puzzle pieces that fit together that I never had, that explain so much of why they are the way that they are. And when they now act the way exactly the same ways that they did, I'm not surprised. I don't actually push back. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I understand why you're this way because of these experiences. And I probably would have been the exact same if I had gone through everything that you went through.
Do you wanna give your little parents a little shout out
Yes,
real quick
yes, yes.
before we close out
My
the episode?
mom, yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. My mom, May Lamb, and my dad, Francis Lamb. I love you both so much, and there is, yeah, there's nothing in this world that can replace what we have now. And yeah, thank you for accepting me for all those years.
So we want to go ahead and thank Joseph Lam for coming on Asian Voices Radio for the Youth Voices segment. If you guys want to go ahead and learn more about him and his work, you can go ahead and visit joejlam.com where you can learn more about him, as well as visit parentsarehuman.com where you can go ahead and get a copy of that game. If you guys have any more suggestions for future topics, we'd love to hear from you. Also, be sure to subscribe as well as follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And on behalf of Joseph Lam, we want to go ahead and thank you guys for listening. And until next time, take care, everyone.